This is Zach Clark with Development and Leadership Coaching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I want to focus on this video on how you can prepare and position yourself for exceptional and significant giving in the second half of the calendar year. So how you can focus and prepare for exceptional and significant giving in the second half of the calendar year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about three things. And all of this is built around the idea that you really need to break your calendar year or your giving year into two parts. And the first part is January through June or July, so the first half of the year. And then the second half of the year would be August through the end of December. That really is the giving year, and there needs to be a flow, sort of an ebb and flow through the giving year in terms of how you communicate and how you ask people and the efforts that you make. So what I'm going to do is focus in on three things that you really need to be doing right now to be positioning yourself not only for results at the end of the first half of the year, but position yourself for greater and more significant giving in the second half of the year. So here are the three things. Number one, you've got to clarify your face-to-face focus. Clarify your face-to-face focus. Number two, do a final push on request to give before the end of July. Number three, craft individual plans for individual donors for the year. And we're going to try to keep this just as simple as those three things. So clarify your face-to-face focus, do a final push with a request to give before the end of July, and then craft individual plans for individual donors for the entire giving year. So let's dig into these a little bit. Clarify your face-to-face focus. As you're looking at the second half of the giving year, you really need to be pursuing 100 face-to-face conversations. Now, you may not be able to do that in a year's time, but that would be a milestone to be thinking about. Have I, in the past year to 18 months, been in front of 100 individuals face-to-face, 100 conversations? People need time to shift their giving priorities. So this idea that you're just going to go meet with someone one time and ask them for a big gift and get great results is not accurate. It takes time for givers to shift their priorities toward greater giving. So you have to really, we know that 100 conversation mark is a key plateau for you to hit, a key step for you to achieve. Also, another number to look at is how many people have you accumulated on your follow-up list, meaning how many people have you met with and begun to move forward in a conversation about your plans for the future and your giving. And when that number is in the 40 range or higher, you are very well positioned for amazing success in the second half of the giving year. If you're under 40, you got some work to do. If you're over, great. But once you get into that 40 range, I've seen this over and over and over again, you've got people that you're able to bring to a point of decision while you're adding new people onto that follow-up list as well that you're bringing along. So very, very important that you keep those two numbers in mind. I need to have 100 conversations because people need time to shift their priorities, and I need 40 people on my follow-up list. Now, we've got to get some clarity here, though. So you know those two numbers. What I want you to be able to think about and get clear on is, who are these people? So at this point, you should have, as you're looking ahead to the second half of the giving year, you should have clarity on who you're focusing on for those conversations and who is on your follow-up list that you've already had conversations with, or how far you need to go to get to 40. So that's number one. Now, number two, do a final push with requests to give before the end of July. I'm amazed at how many organizations are so oriented toward just asking people to give in terms of a broad appeal at the end of December, but they're not doing anything mid-year. I really believe that's a mistake. So what I encourage you to do is look at your donor population in a specific segmented way. And group A would be the first segment. These are people that gave in the first 6 months of last year. And so you really need to see them give again in the first 6 months this year. So group A, those are people that if you haven't asked them, you need to be asking them, and you need to be following up as you lead up to the end of the first half of the year. The second segment is looking at what I would call group B, which are people that gave in the second half of last year who haven't yet given. So even though their giving is ahead of you, you really can focus on some of those, asking those to give, but you want to be intentional and you want to be careful. Another segment is donors to regain. So these are people that did not give last year, they haven't given this year, but they gave in previous years. So again, those are people to be communicating with and really encouraging to take action before the mid-year. Again, by doing all this now, you're positioning yourself for the second half of the giving year. And then lastly, you can focus in on your non-donors. There's a lot of people on your list who aren't giving anything and they've never given anything. It is not wise to expend energy trying to ask all those people to give all the time. Instead, look through that group and try to carve out a segment that you're going to focus on trying to recruit to giving. Maybe you're going to talk to them about a specific project or a specific request to try to mobilize them to start giving for the first time. But be intentional about picking that segment. And then the third area that we're talking about is this crafting individual plans for individual donors for the year. So this is where the greatest results can really come. In your overall plan for your ministry, for your organization, there are specific projects that some people would be interested in. So you've got a specific reason to be following up with them right now and either asking them to give now or positioning them for the second half of the year by talking about how you have a plan for your future, and that plan in view includes a specific project that you believe they would be most interested in. So there's no way to do this other than looking at what are our individual projects within our plan and who are the individual donors that we would want to try to connect them to. If that's even 10 people that you've got an individual plan on, if you've never done this before, this is going to make a huge difference in your giving in the second half of the year, and maybe even as you're finishing this part of the year. Also, on this concept of individual plans for individual donors, make sure that you've made a distinction between people individually that you're asking to give now versus people that you need to just be thanking and reporting to prepare them for a future ask in the second half of the year. This whole one-size-fits-all of we're going to ask everybody at this point and we're going to ask everybody again later is not going to cut it. Focus on who, kind of dividing up who can I ask at this point in the year individually, and what are we going to ask them for, and then who do we just need to be thanking and reporting to so that we're positioning them for the second half of the year. If you don't do this now, you are playing catch up later. You don't have the time it takes to give donors the time to reprioritize their giving. So as I close, remember to keep this just as simple as positioning yourself to follow up to requests to give by middle of the year. By end of July, you should have as many of your donors as possible in the position of where you're following up with them before the end of July to encourage them to give. And then at the same time, begin to thank and report to specific individuals that you're positioning for giving in the second half of the year. Keep it just that simple, and you're going to see amazing results. Thank you.